I think something that struck me right from the beginning is that there is still very much a kind of entrepreneurial mindset. So I kind of make it happen. We don't say no to customers. We say, okay, well, let's figure out how we can do that together. And that's huge for me. So the ability to be kind of collaborative, creative, the mindset within the organization that leans that way.
All right, so I was doing research for this episode and I found out that the cleanroom technology market in 2023 was estimated at $8.2 billion. You want to guess what that number is in 2028? It's approximately $11.5 billion. And so I had to pick out a person who can come and talk to us about this, who knows a thing or two, and turns out my guest today knows a lot more about this. Please welcome to the show, Sarah Stevens, President of Azzur Labs and Cleanrooms on Demand. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I want to start off by asking you, what are your thoughts on that statistic?
Yeah, it's exciting. I guess I'm probably not surprised. And again, I think it's just encouraging to hear of such buoyant growth and kind of reflects, I guess, where we are in terms of, demands on cleanroom capacity, evolving needs of drug development and ATMPs, advanced therapies in particular. So
yeah. So it's a very innovative concept, right? Clean rooms on demand, and the way I like to think of concepts is compare it to other existing, companies or images. So the first time I heard of clean rooms on demand, it clicked to me. Oh, it's like Airbnb, but just for clean rooms. Is that a good way to put it?
I think it's. I think the thing about the clean room on demand concept really is the flexibility that it affords that differs somewhat to other, clean room or facility infrastructures, particularly in the kind of drug development space. So not quite Airbnb, maybe comparable in its innovative nature. But yeah, I think that, we tend to think about this as beyond simply, there's a room, go stay in it, and everything that you need is there. It's much more a kind of facilitative approach. So we are, providing expertise and wraparound services to really enable best use of the cleanroom footprints that we have.
Yeah, and I want to double click on that because you mentioned flexibility, right? And obviously for a biotech or pharma company, investing in building out their own lab space, that can take a lot of, qualification, validation, setup, all of that stuff versus going and working with a company like Azzur who already has this space. What are some of the other benefits that, maybe are putting Azzur as a separate than other companies who are doing this? Or just in general, why would companies, biopharma companies, want to get a clean room on demand versus building their own?
Yeah, no, I think you've hit on, I guess, one of the two biggest drivers that we see, and one is that there's a huge, expense, capital outlay to build a facility, to build the infrastructure and the expertise to run that. So you have the capital outlay and then ongoing operational expense, and that, of course, is regardless of what's happening. So if you're an early phase innovator, you've embarked on this large capital expenditure, but then your use of that footprint, the utilization may be sporadic, and that's just science, and that's just falling in line with, clinical programs and so on. So a huge draw towards our footprint, which of course is operational, it's ready to use. We can, support with all of the ancillary services around process development and batch manufacturing. Is really exactly that. There's risk mitigation, cash conservation, do the work. You're still in early development. Things can still happen, so you want to be able to have the flexibility, I should say, to understand your process, understand your product. And again, doing that in a way where, as I say, you're conserving cash and really mitigating a lot of risk, especially in the early phase space. I think the other thing, part two, is as our customers are kind of, weighing up the options, it's build, and I think there's much less of that going on now. Or it's, working with utilizing CDMO capacity. So the kind of, which again, it works for many, But what it does not afford is that same degree of flexibility to kind of come in and out. You're not kind of at the mercy of schedules and other things. So it's really your own cleanroom space to be used as and when it's required. So again, ties back to that point on flexibility, but again, risk mitigation being a big one too.
That's interesting. And overall in the industry, we're seeing this trend where companies are moving towards, outsourcing activities or collaborating with other partners versus doing it in-house. We've seen it with, CROs, and we've seen so many CROs in the past 20 years that have started as, even look at North Carolina, where I'm from, Research Triangle Park is one of the biggest hubs for CROs in the world with all the big names out here. Then we've seen CDMOs, and now here's another concept, same idea. Why do it on our own? Why spend the money when, we can collaborate and leverage a site that can, do that? So do you know if there are any other areas where this model would apply? Like, do you know any other areas in the industry where companies would be like, hey, we're doing this in-house, but maybe there is a market for some other player to come in and outsource this? I'm just curious. If you don't have any, that's fine. But I was just...
I agree. I think that's whole kind of democratization of drug development. Now, the outsourcing is, fully embedded as a method across, drug development, even med device. And so I think it's interesting, just on your point about, CDMOs, that's my entire experience until Azzur is obviously within the CDMO space. And there's such a kind of evolution of CDMOs from very much transactional kind of vendor to really becoming, collaborative partners and providing that basis of innovation in themselves. So it's been quite a remarkable cycle over the last, 20 years or so. And I think what's interesting now is these kind of disruptive innovations like the Azzur concept are really speaking to the evolution towards advanced therapies. So the needs, the traditional drug product development, something goes well, you're sort of scaling up and becomes a higher throughput, larger volume play perhaps. Whereas with some of the novel curative therapeutics, cell therapy, for example, that's not how it goes. You're scaling out. So that the footprint doesn't necessarily need to go up, but it may need to be kind of duplicative. And so it just feels to me like this. And CDMOs too are, evolving in the same way to accommodate these slightly differing outsourcing needs that we see. But we see from everything from kind of, big traditional pharma through some of the rapidly growing biotechs to the kind of innovative university spin-out incubator type folks. So differing needs, but that point in common, that kind of flexible access and always, mitigating risk.
Yeah.
I didn't question.
No, it did. Yeah, it did. And I was curious to know, like, so you touched on some of the areas where the clean rooms on demand concept where you specialize in. So from an ideal customer perspective, like, what are some of the segments or types of biopharma customers that would benefit from this technology? Or do you have any case studies of an ideal project or a collaboration that you want to talk about?
Mm-hmm. And I think that we, without doubt, our kind of dominant customer sits within ATMPs in general and specifically cell therapies. And I think that a lot of that has to do with, the high kind of degree of risk, I guess, that's inherent there, and the fact that our infrastructure footprint and expertise can really enable that, whether it be, within some of our purpose-built facilities, which are just, truly kind of state-of-the-art in terms of their construction specification or geographies. We kind of span East Coast, West Coast, and so on. And so without doubt, I would say that's our dominant customer group. We also work with several in the gene therapy space, and these tend to be, innovators. And again, I mentioned some med device. So, we have the opportunity to serve a really, diverse customer base across, different parts of life sciences, broadly speaking, but we certainly see a kind of a lean towards cell therapy innovators. We have a couple of examples of, customers that have really I guess we've grown alongside each other is probably the best way to put it. And from Azzur's kind of entrepreneurial beginnings and creating the Cleanroom on demand concept, we do have a couple of customers, as I say, who were there right from the beginning. And, you know, what's kind of phenomenal about those partnerships, those relationships, is that we have evolved with them. So we have evolved to meet that kind of, you know, developing customer need. You know, even more exciting is, of course, the success that those customers are seeing, and that they have progressed all the way from, you know, very early development through to now thinking about, you know, phase 3 and you know, commercial production. So, yeah, as I say, we have, you know, taking even Massachusetts as an example, where we have 3 facilities, you know, going from Waltham, closer to the centre of Boston, which is really conducive to kind of early development work, through to our latest facility, which is in Devons, where we actually have our opening ceremony coming up soon. And again, it's just been, you know, truly state-of-the-art facility, 30 clean rooms, each one, you know, isolated, segregated, and just really well put together. And again, it's some of that kind of, you know, learnings, I guess. And as I say, working alongside our customers. And I think that we are, the company has been, you know, kind of really fortunate, privileged to be able to do that.
Yeah, it reminds me of, you know, those are Waltham and Devons. I actually started my career consulting in Boston in 2012 at Millennium Pharmaceuticals that, you know, ended up being acquired by Takeda. And then I worked at Biogen and a bunch of other Boston startups. So yeah, I haven't been to Boston in a long time, but I hear that there's tons of, you know, always tons of stuff happening there. So that's actually a segue into my next question that I was going to ask you. In terms of geographical presence, you mentioned that 3 facilities in Boston. So what is it today? Like, how many facilities in US, Europe, and you know, can you share some numbers, if you will?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the 3 here, as I've mentioned, we have one very close to where you are now in RTP. So again, just a real state-of-the-art facility there. We have 24 clean rooms within that facility, and also have our Azzur labs, including our ATMP testing capabilities within that same facility. So again, that's kind of an evolution, a development for us, where Azzur Labs was historically operating somewhat independently, but now kind of bringing these 2 service lines, if you like, together. Again, just really kind of recognizing, capitalizing on the need that our customers have, which is for, you know, whether it be fundamental microbiology testing capabilities alongside the clean room, and evolving more recently into ATMP testing capabilities. So North Carolina and Raleigh is one example of where we have those all within the same footprint. Devons here in Massachusetts is another. And we also have a facility across very near San Diego in Vista. Again, smaller facility, 9 clean rooms there, but similar in the sense that our Azzur Labs footprint is not yet in the same building, but very less than a mile away. So really trying to provide that kind of holistic service offering to customers that complements, you know, what they're doing within the clean room footprint. We have other lab locations. The largest, actually, our original Azzur lab is very near Philadelphia. And so again, as we think about, you know, future growth, where do we want to be? We kind of think about, okay, clearly where are the sort of biopharma hubs you might be close, probably not right in the centre of, but close by, and really thinking about, again, that sort of synergy between Azzur Labs capability and the, you know, the value that brings to our Cleanroom on demand customers. Okay,
so you mentioned Boston, San Diego, North Carolina, and Philly. No. How about Europe? You don't have any facilities there, or planning on?
As of today, we are not operating outside of the US. There's definitely a never say never.
Yep.
Kind of hindsight. Yeah, clearly I'm not from the US, and so operating outside and UK, Europe was certainly something that we, you know, have very open mind about.
Okay. And, you know, my introduction to Azzur was, like I said, back in 2012 when I was in the consulting world. And that's the first time I interacted with a bunch of people at Azzur who were like, you know, account executives or recruiters working with biotech startups. I might have even interviewed for a couple of consulting roles with Azzur or some client. I don't remember. But so I always thought like, okay, Azzur is in this consulting space, and then I hear about clean rooms, and I see that now. So what all is Azzur doing? Because I haven't kept up, obviously, with a lot.
And I think it's been a rapid evolution, but you're right in the sense that consulting was really the origins of Azzur Group. It has grown exponentially too. So we have consulting practices that are really dotted all across the nation. Benefits to our customer base of that, of course, is that, the locale, the close proximity of our consultants to customer. And again, we work, so that, I guess, was the kind of jumping off point, if you like, for Azzur Group. And again, that sort of line of sight, that kind of intelligence of what's going on, where the needs are, where the pain points are, is again part of or has been part of that kind of entrepreneurial philosophy of what do we, where do we go next? What makes sense? Really responding to what the company saw as kind of market and customer needs. So consulting came first. As I say, it's about half of our company today. It's grown exponentially. We work very collaboratively across, the clean rooms, labs, and consulting today.
Okay. And you, I was looking at your profile and your background. You have, extensive, academic background, and you did a lot of, research and education, advanced education. Walk me through, how did you end up in life sciences?
Yeah. I mean, it was not exactly a straight line. So I was kind of a little bit of a late starter. I thoroughly enjoyed my teens and early 20s and working in the hospitality industry. By that, I mean bars and restaurants.
Yes. I figured that.
Yeah. So something of a late starter. I was drawn originally to study pharmacy. My mum was actually a professor of pharmaceutics, so she was an academic. So I had some, awareness, line of sight to what that was all about. And I was intrigued by this as a course of study at that time, especially because it was just really interesting to me. Medicine's development. I was never, I didn't study pharmacy because I intended to be a pharmacist. And so I really enjoyed the kind of scientific content, just understanding how medicines were developed, the science that underpins that. And so I went on to do a PhD, so really furthering some of the, scientific research, as you mentioned. But all this time, I had a pretty clear goal to work in industry. So again, I've dabbled, might be the word, in terms of kind of, academic research. Phenomenal foundation. So, I think that's kind of held me in good stead, but very quickly kind of fell into really services provision. Started out at a small CDMO that was at that time called NCAP Drug Delivery in Scotland, which is where I'm from. And from there, joined what again was at the time, to your point on all the various acquisitions and changes in names, at the time was Azzur in Scotland. We became part of AMRI by acquisition. And so I'd really progressed through various, bench scientific roles, operational leadership, and then fairly quickly into a general management position where I've always enjoyed that kind of intersection of, commercial, financial growth alongside, science and various technologies, and the opportunity, certainly within the CDMO space, to really see so many different innovative drug products, ideas, customers. It's just, I've always, really, really been drawn to that and enjoy that type of fast-paced interaction. Moved to the US 8 years ago now, and that was as part of AMRI, it's now Curia. So yeah, I've always, as I say, been in a kind of customer-facing services provision, and after leaving AMRI, I joined a company called Quotient Sciences, another really kind of innovative company that provides a platform called translational pharmaceutics. So they are truly differentiated in the sense that they are integrating all the way from, discovery, early formulation development through to commercial manufacturing of a range of dosage forms. And what they did, again, that, I guess always looking for something a little bit different in the services provision space. So they have in-house clinics in which they can run first-in-human studies and really, pressure test the dosage forms that are being developed. So that was a, phenomenal experience, exposure to the, real clinical end. And so after Quotient, again, I always say that Azzur Group was it was kind of like an itch that I couldn't scratch. I kept hearing more and more, much like you say about this company. I was aware of the consulting capability. I was so intrigued by the Cleanroom on demand concept and very much drawn, as I say, to it as a differentiated and really innovative approach that really speaks to the needs of, particularly advanced therapeutics innovators. But again, just that broad, just the concept of the flexibility, the risk mitigation, our ability to enable, others to really create value within the footprint. So yeah, it was intriguing, couldn't quite shake it off, and then joined here in September of last year.
Yeah, so you've been there less than a year, but then, given your time in the company and interacting with your colleagues and understanding the business model, it sounds like you're very excited that you made that right decision. I can sense that from all the work you're doing and how passionate you're about this. But what are a couple of things that you love about, working with your colleagues at Azzur?
I think something that struck me right from the beginning is there is still very much a kind of entrepreneurial mindset. So I kind of make it happen. We don't say no to customers. We say, okay, well, let's figure out how we can do that together. And that's huge for me. So the ability to be kind of collaborative, creative, the mindset within the organization that leans that way. People here, I think fundamentally it's the people. They have been, again, right across, I guess, the last 6 months or so, very open to change, which again is, that's unusual, actually, to have that overwhelming, willingness to think differently, all the way from people who, were part of the inception of Azzur. So I've really enjoyed the kind of culture. And yeah, as I say, that sort of, the kind of thoughtful bias to action and willingness to evolve and change. And that's kind of the cliche of what got us here won't get us there, but I think Azzur really embraces that.
Yeah, and you mentioned, I think, maybe a few minutes before, you mentioned about collaboration and, having that being an important part of your experience, how you work in the services, different type of services industry and roles. So in terms of when you are leading this lab and clean rooms on demand work stream within Azzur, what are some of the guiding principles around collaboration that you want your team to remember when they're interacting with clients? What's your vision on that?
Yeah, it's a great question, actually. And I think how we interact with our customers should and does kind of reflect how we interact with one another. So a huge focus always for me on our ways of working. I talk about that a lot. It doesn't really matter where we sit in an organization, but our ways of working together are the most important thing, and that extends to our customers. So looking for kind of the opportunity to be greater than the sum of the individual parts. How can we do more together? How does this bolster, our value proposition or value creation opportunity for our customers? So a lot of transparency tends to be my MO. So transparency, collaborative thinking, and again, just focusing on how we do things. So, it could be just as simple as, are we doing this as efficiently as we can? Are we capitalizing on all the capability that we have? And then, as I say, kind of extending that to the customer interaction where, again, transparent communication, sharing of the brain power is most definitely, the way to go.
Mm. And when you think about from what because I know you mentioned you started in September of last year, and based on your conversations with other leadership team at Azzur, what can we expect in future? I know maybe you cannot share everything, but if you can, maybe give us a trailer of what Azzur is looking to do, in the future to maybe extend its collaboration with the global life sciences industry.
Yeah, no, I think we are open and focused on both organic and inorganic growth. So I think that we will see the demand. We are feeling, the early demand for increased Cleanroom on demand footprint. So I think, we're actively exploring how would we go about, where would we go to kind of grow that service line. I think that what we will continue to do is operate our lab testing capability, somewhat hand in glove. So I think that, future Cleanroom on Demand locations will have lab capability alongside, and, within that same footprint, we're most definitely seeing benefit, to our customers and certainly to us of operating in that way. And then we are exploring and considering, partnerships that of course can always, develop into something more, and really looking at the kind of the front end and the back end. So where do our customers come from? Many of them come from, kind of incubator style footprints. And so looking to build on existing, relationships and partnerships that we have there, bolstering our consulting capabilities. So we talk often about, CMC consulting expertise. And again, always from the premise of what do our customers need? What enables them to create value? What brings momentum? And again, affords that flexibility. So those are the kind of, I guess, in general terms, the lines of thinking.
Yeah, that's it's fascinating to see the growth. Like, I know a lot of other consulting firms from when I started my career, and they necessarily haven't grown as much or grown in the direction or the pace at which Azzur has grown. I mean, some have, but some haven't, right? So it's really interesting for me to see that, Azzur sort of branched out of consulting. Like, other companies have been in consulting, but just have gone to the next level in consulting. But Azzur is sort of, like going into a completely different service model and, adding value there. So it's very interesting for me to see that. And I'll be, definitely following Azzur and you on social media and, listening to what else you're doing, because it's a fascinating story from what I see in the last 10 years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. And you're welcome to come and see any of our Meet Me in Raleigh next time.
Yes. Yeah, I was going to say, if you're in Raleigh or if I'm in Boston, I'll definitely send you a message. We can connect. Thank you so much for your time. This was a very interesting topic. Like I said at the start, I have not talked about this with any of my past guests. So I was super excited to have you on and talk to us. Any last words you want to share with our audience?
Well, first to say thank you for having me. I've also thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and yeah, I also look forward to Azzur Group's progression, and I'm sure there's lots more growth and evolution to come. So yeah, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yep, my pleasure. That's it. That's the pod. And if you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe and like us on YouTube. Really appreciate that. And we can bring you more guests like Sarah and others in the future. So thank you.